Well, hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today. I am Lizzie, and I'm the program chair for the Juneau Audubon Society, and we're so happy that you joined us. Um, the Juneau Audubon Society is a member-based organization. We have some of the lowest membership rates in all of Juneau. It's just $10 a month to support the conservation and citizen science work that we do. We do have a super easy way to donate and continue your membership on our website. Our membership is on a calendar year basis. So if, unless you became a member very recently, you'll want to go ahead and visit the website and become a member or renew your membership. The uh, I just went ahead and dropped that donation link in the chat. The Juneau Audubon Society acknowledges the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people of Southeast Alaska who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. We at JAS are grateful to bird and hold events, field trips, and presentations on the ancestral and traditional lands of the indigenous peoples in Akwon territory and throughout Tlingit Ani. And Arin is joining us from Anchorage, I believe the land of the Dena'ina people, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Um, our next presentation is to be announced. I'm working on something really cool for November, and we're looking at November 13th. So stay tuned to our social media, our Facebook and our Instagram, and our website where our events are listed. Um, Wherever you are on October 11th, which is, geez, is that that's Saturday. Go ahead and take a pause because that's October Big Day. Take a couple of minutes to enjoy birds and share what you find on eBird. You can participate from anywhere, even your backyard. It's supposed to be a gorgeous weekend in Southeast. Be a part of the global team and help set a new record for October birding. JAS will be at Public Market this year. We look forward to seeing you with a couple of cool ways to support the Juneau Audubon Society and, um, you know, a bird-friendly holiday season. And without any further ado, I am happy to introduce Arin Underwood. She's a wildlife biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. She's based in Anchorage and supports research on boreal birds and small mammals, including two citizen science projects, the Southeast or South Central, that monitoring project, and the Birds and Bogs program. And with that, I will let you take it away, Arin. Thanks so much for joining us.
Cool. Thank you, Lizzie. Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
We sure can.
Super. Okay. I can't see the chat when I'm in presentation mode, so if there's any questions or anything that pop up, either unmute and let me know, or I'll get to them at the end, hopefully. So yeah, my name is Erin Underwood. I'm with the Threatened, Endangered, and Diversity Program, or the TED program with Fish and Game. And tonight I'm talking about the Hemisphere hoppers, Alaska's Lesser Yellowlegs project. Let's see. So, a quick overview of what I wanted to go over today. I was going to give a little bit of background about our program, the TED program, what we do at the department, and the species that we focus on and why. Um, and then sort of give an overview of shorebirds in general in Alaska, why they migrate up here, the migrations that they do, and then sort of zoom in a bit more on the Legs, and then hop into the Legs project that we have here in Alaska and how that connects to a bigger project that goes across the hemispheres and into both Americas. And then I will have some conservation actions at the end for helping to conserve birds in Alaska. And then hopefully we'll have that time for questions at the end. So, the Threatened, Endangered, and Diversity Program, or the TED program, this is a statewide non-game program. We have offices in Juneau, Anchorage, and Fairbanks. There's about 10 or so of us working on a variety of different projects. And our program mission is to conserve the natural diversity of Alaska's wildlife, habitats, and ecosystems. And we do that through Endangered Species Act work, research on species that are data deficient or have declines or threats, and then public outreach and education. So these are some of the projects that we have going on in these pictures. I work on the colored pica project. That's the top left photo and the bottom right photo. We have someone working on red knots in Cordova, out of Juneau, and then we have a lot of several different raptor projects up in Fairbanks, like this golden eagle project. And then we also work on a variety of other things like pollinators and amphibians and seabirds and all kinds of things. Our ultimate goal there is to keep the common species common and then recover species that have had population losses. And so all of these species that we focus on, we call them our species of greatest conservation need, or SGCN. And what makes a species get onto this list is these criteria here. So this would be a species that would be considered at risk for some reason. So for example, this tree swallow here would be considered at risk because its population of aerial insectivores is declining across North America. Little brown bat would be considered at risk as well because they have had major population declines on the East Coast. And then the lesser yellowlegs would also be considered SGCN because of their declines in the last several decades. And then other species that would be considered SGCN are those that are stewardship. So species who where a majority of their population occurs in Alaska. So this would be trumpeter swans. Almost all of their breeding population is here in the summer, as well as endemic species that only live in Alaska, such as the Alaska hare. And then the collared pika isn't quite endemic. It has a couple populations in Canada, but a majority of its population exists here. So those would be the stewardship species. And then sentinel species are those that I sort of describe them as the canary in the coal mine. Those that, when their populations have significant changes, it's an indicator of environmental change that will affect other species and ecosystems. So these are all kind of different reasons why one of these guys might get onto our SGCN list and is a species that we would study for our program. I've mentioned several birds having declining populations, and this all comes from this paper that came out a few years ago that we could just call a 3 billion birds paper. I think it's by Rosenberg from 2019. And if you want to go into more detail on this, their website is 3billionbirds.org. But this paper essentially looked at the breeding bird survey and the Christmas bird count and other sources since 1970, over the last 50 years or so, and concluded that there'd been a massive decline of all North American bird species that calculated out to about 1 in 4 birds missing from the collective adult population, or about 3 billion birds. And the main reasoning behind this was predicted to be habitat loss or degradation. So just a loss of high quality habitat, either partially or completely, and it's affected most species. There's been a few recoveries since in the last couple of decades, mostly waterfowl and raptors, but it's hit almost all the other bird species pretty hard. And this is boreal wetland birds in particular as well. Migratory birds are down about 28%, or 2.5 billion birds. Aerial insectivores are down 32%, 160 million birds. This includes swallows and flycatchers, which are other species that we study up here in Anchorage and Fairbanks. And I think that's about 2 in 5 barn swallows are also gone, which I think might be a little bit more of a southeast bird. I've seen them one time in Anchorage. That was pretty exciting. So this is because of this paper is a reason why a lot of the birds in Alaska are on the SGCN list. And this is, of course, concerning. I guess I don't need to tell the Audubon folks this, but how birds contribute to ecosystem health, human health, economies, ecosystems. They're just massively important parts of our wildlife. And so this is very concerning. And so how that kind of pops into shorebirds. So, shorebirds are in the order of ceratiforms, and this kind of includes sandpipers, plovers, avocets, oystercatchers, phalaropes, and this is about 235 species in the world, about 50 in North America. Um, yeah, kind of depending on how you define them being here, if that's just if they've ever been seen here, or if they breed here, or something like that. But there are about 50 species in North America. And so this decline that's been recorded by this paper is about 37% decline in North American shorebirds. So that's about a third of the population in the last 50 years has been lost. And to kind of visualize that a little bit, I made this little graphic here that has 100 shorebirds, and the 37% that are missing is about that many. So you can kind of visualize the biomass that has been lost from these populations. So I wanted to talk a little bit about shorebirds in Alaska and why they're so fascinating, and the way that they get here is so just cool, and how that kind of translates into the lesser Yellowlegs. So this is a map of the major flyways in the world. We've got about five or so that affect Alaska. So you can see here on the far left there, there's the Australasian Flyway, there's the Pacific Flyway, the Pacific Americas Flyway, the Mississippi Americas Flyway, also called the Mid-Continental Flyway, and a little bit of the Atlantic Flyway. So these are the pathways that migratory birds take to get to Alaska every migration season. And as you can see, it hops the hemispheres, if you will, all the way down from South America, New Zealand, and Australia. And so it's just these huge like rivers of biomass that are just moving across the planet every year, and bringing all of these birds and resources and things like that up to Alaska for breeding season. And this is a lot of shorebirds. So I'm gonna throw a bunch of numbers at you here real quick. So in Alaska, there's about 70 species that have been seen in Alaska, but only 50 or so breed here, and maybe 37 are regular constant breeders that we see every year. So again, kind of, how you define a bird being seen here, but those are the basic numbers. And so this translates to about 12 million shorebirds coming up here every summer, and huge concentrations of birds. So there's a couple of bottlenecks where these migrations occur. The Copper River Delta is one, outside of Cordova a little bit. There can be 5 or 8 million shorebirds there, about 7 million on the YK Delta. And I went down there to the Copper River Delta for the migration season a couple of years ago, and it's kind of a cool place to be to visualize something like this. And you can also visualize it a bit at the Kachemak Festival, anywhere where there's just those food resources for migrating birds, and you can just see these huge flocks going by, and it's kind of wild to think about all these shorebirds that are coming up here, and how many there are. And this connects Alaska to over 40 countries on 5 continents, with birds flying sometimes 20,000 miles round trip every year. And the lesser yellowlegs specifically can fly about 16,000 miles round trip each year on these migrations. So it's very impressive journey that these birds take every year, and it's pretty cool to see. These are a couple of pictures from when I was in the Copper River Delta. So you can kind of see on the left there, we were at all these beaches, and we were surveying for red knots as part of one of the projects down in this based in Juneau. But the field work was outside of Cordova here. And we were riding bikes down here and looking for banded red knots to see how important this area was to their population. And it's just a really great place for them to refuel and find food and little mollusks and bugs and things. And here's another picture of some dunlin flying by. And so it was just this pretty cool visualization of these shorebird migrations that come up here every year. And it's really cool to see. And it's cool to be in a kind of place that supports that kind of habitat that brings all these birds here. This is another migration map. I got a lot of maps here. So this one shows about 10 shorebird species and the routes they take specifically to get to Alaska. So you can see the bar-tailed godwit there, and on the left with the Dunlin, they follow the East Australasian flyway. And this is spring migration. Yeah. Fall migration routes can be a little different. So the bar-tailed godwit, in the fall, they're going to go across the Pacific over Hawaii to get down, but in the spring, this is their route. So they change that based on the different winds wind patterns because they follow the winds to get them to their destination. And you can see the Yellowlegs in the upper right there, number 7, and their migration path is yellow. And you can see that yellow arrow kind of overlapping with a couple other species, but it's going down through the mid-continental flyway and down into South America. And then a lot of shorebirds are using that Pacific flyway on the west coast of North America. So there's a couple of different strategies that the birds will use here. The Yellowlegs specifically uses the sort of hopscotch strategy where they will hop from Alaska to Canada to the Dakotas, maybe down to Mexico and then down to South America. And then some birds just send it across the ocean. Like I'm sure you guys heard about the godwit a couple years ago, bar-tailed godwit who just flew from Alaska to Australia in like 11 days straight. So there's a couple different strategies they take. And the Alaskan Yellowlegs are more of hopscotchers, but the East Coast Yellowlegs can sort of scoot across this little stretch of ocean here sometimes. So some people ask why all of these birds make these massive, energetically expensive journeys to come to Alaska. Why is Alaska so um, why do all the birds come here and, other animals, frankly? And it's mostly because Alaska has a huge amount of very high quality habitat with a lot of food. And the further north you go for a lot of these species, the fewer predators there's going to be, the fewer pathogens, fewer parasites. So there's a lot of high quality, undisturbed habitat in Alaska with fewer threats and good food availability. And that's why most migratory birds and shorebirds are going to head up here for breeding season. It makes it worth it to fly 8,000 miles across the equator there. All right, so I'm gonna zoom in on lesser yellowlegs now and kind of give a little bit of a background. I know they're not quite a Juno bird. I think they're mostly there during migration season. They tend to nest more up here in South Central, but if you guys are ever visiting, you can always see them in nesting season or in August, I think is a good time to see them down in Juneau. So these little guys, they're in the cratiform order, but they are in the Scolopasidae family, which is sandpipers, snipes, turnstones, and curlews. So like these other species we have here, we got the Wilson snipe and black turnstone there. So their scientific name is Tringa flavipes. Flavipes, yeah. And they were formally described in 1789, and the flavipes comes from Latin flavis, which means yellow, and then pes means foot. So it just kind of means yellow foot. And then tringa comes from a word that Aristotle first used to describe a thrush-sized white-rumped wading bird. So that's where their scientific name comes from. And I found this cool illustration here from Audubon that was made in 1836, and that is a plate of Alessia legs, although it looks like it is most likely not in Alaska. But it's always kind of cool to see these historical renditions of these birds that we see here. And these guys have a lot of different names. So we call them the Alessia legs in North America. They're called the yellow shank in Europe, and they have several different Native Alaska names. They have a Inupiaq name, a couple different Yupik names. They have names in French. They have a lot of different Spanish names, depending on what country you're in. And they have several different Portuguese names, again, depending on the country. They also have names in a lot of different European languages and Icelandic. And I'll show you the eBird map in a second that kind of explains why that is. But what's cool about this huge list of names that they have is it kind of demonstrates the range of the bird and how many different groups of people that they affect and who get to see them every year and how they go by. So all their different Spanish names kind of reflects the South American countries that they pass through. And their name also has a meaning where, like, their Yupik name is the one who's greeting really loud. And I have a video later on that kind of explains that. That's you only really see it in the breeding season because they're very protective of their chicks and their nests, and they're also called knights in French for the same reason. So they're not going to attack you, but they will scream at you. And I've heard the word car alarm used several times in reference to these birds, and I know that because I'm usually out in their breeding grounds when they do not want me there. So I've been yelled at quite a lot by these guys. but that's all they'll do. So it's not too bad. So these little guys are kind of a small migratory shorebird. They're a long distance migrant. They cross, like I showed you in the map before, all the way through South America and North America. But they only have like a 24-inch wingspan and they weigh about 82 grams, which is the same as a deck of cards or a tangerine. So they really don't weigh that much and they're not even 10 inches tall. So these guys are pretty small, delicate little shorebirds. And they're very recognizable with their bright namesake yellow legs. And this is them in other forms of their life. So we have a Les Yellowlegs nest on the left there. They almost always lay 4 eggs. Sometimes it'll be 3, but almost every single nest I've seen in the last 4 years has had 4 eggs in it. And they're a little bit blue in this photo, but they can also be pretty brown and pretty cream, but they always have those speckles on them, but there is a bit of a variety in the coloration, which is interesting. And then we have Les Yellowlegs chicks on the right there. They're usually pretty young when we capture them. This is them that we've got in a little mosquito net here, and we're just kind of keeping them safe while we band their parents. And I'll go into a little bit more about that later when I talk about our field work. And these eggs are maybe an inch and a half long. They're pretty small little eggs. And if you've seen other pictures of shorebird nests, almost all of them have 4 eggs and they're pointed and they're sort of arranged in a circle like that. And if there's 4 laid, they're almost always going to be arranged like that. And this minimizes the space that's needed to form a nest. So it makes it so it's very small, compact, less conspicuous, harder to find. And then when they're in a circle like that, it increases the efficiency of the heat transfer from parent to egg. So most shorebirds are going to have nests like this to make sure that the eggs are as warm as possible and as hidden as possible. So that's why a lot of those nests look like that. And these nests, there's not a lot of material in them. You can kind of see that it's not like a traditional nest where there's like a shape to it or there's grass and twigs around the edges. And these guys don't really build a nest like that. To make the nest cup, we just call them, oh, the dogs barking a little bit. To make these nest cups, the parents will find somewhere that they think is protected and has some shrubbery over it, and they'll sort of just push their chest into the ground and kind of move around and scrape their feet a little bit, and then they'll make it round with their chest. And it's just kind of like a scrape in the ground, and sometimes they'll put a little bit of lichen in there, but if the eggs weren't in there, it wouldn't really look like anything. It would just sort of look like a little indent in the ground. So they're hard to find if there's no eggs in them, which is another another reason they're a little tricky part of studying these guys. They're a pretty cryptic species. They're hard to find in their breeding grounds, and they're hard to find their nests, and they're hard to capture, which is a little bit of a trait of a lot of the species of conservation need that the TED program studies, is because if they're data deficient, it's because a lot of the times it's because they're cryptic or hard to find. So that's why these guys didn't have too much research going on them before. And what's also kind of fun about these guys is the size of their legs when they're small. So this chick here has just very recently hatched. They're not even a day old, and that green band that we've put on their leg is the exact same band that an adult would get. So their leg is the same circumference as an adult leg, and it really doesn't grow that much as they get older. They're kind of come out of the egg with these legs that aren't too much different from what they'll have as an adult. And when we see them again in a couple of years, if they do come back, they don't always. In fact, they often, most usually do not return to their ground where they were born. They will have that same green band on their adult leg, and it'll look no different. It'll fit them exactly the same way. So it's kind of nice for us. It makes it easy to band these little guys when they're so small, but it's just kind of wild to see on their tiny, tiny little bodies. Hmm. So these are boreal wetland birds. You're going to find them in shrub meadows, powerline clearings, spruce bogs. I most often see them in shrub meadows and spruce bogs. That's where we're going to find their nests. There's a big variety of nesting sites they like. We found their nests under alders, in grassy areas, in a birch forest, in a flooded spruce bog on like an island of moss. There's just a lot of different places their nests could be. And their chicks are considered precocial, which is the opposite of humans. Humans are altricial, which mostly means that when we're born, we're kind of helpless and we need adults to take care of us. Just like a songbird, when like robins are born and they're kind of pink and helpless and they can't do anything and they need the parents to take care of them. And a lot of shorebirds and less yellowlegs, they're more like moose, where as soon as they're born, within a couple hours, they are like ready to go, and they don't really have that helpless phase. So this little guy, like I said, he probably hatched maybe within the last 5 hours, and I can almost guarantee that 5 hours later, he was no longer there. He had already scooted away, and we came back to that site the next day, and they were about 2 miles away from where they had hatched. So they move quickly and they move fast, and as soon as those feathers dry off, they are scampering across the wetland as fast as their giant legs can take them. So, which is another reason that it's hard to catch the adults and the chicks, is because there's kind of a narrow window when you are able to catch them. And that's because the chicks just take off so fast. So, this picture is also of a Luciole eggs incubating on their nest. Both parents take turns incubating the eggs. And in the winter, you can find them on the coastlines, lakes, floodplains, kind of agricultural areas. Also, during migration, they'll be in agriculture areas and wetland habitats. Hmm. And this kind of relates to their diet. So these little guys are going to be water column foragers. They're going to just kind of walk through little muddy, flooded areas and ponds and just poke around with their beak and look for invertebrates, little larvae, chironomids mostly. I think they're called bloodworms sometimes, little midge larvae. And they can be in brackish water by the coast, or in freshwater ponds and lakes and things like that. So they've got a lot of variety of places that you can find them in their breeding area, which is kind of cool. So I've mentioned a little bit about their migration and about how they go about their business. So I kind of wanted to summarize what the life of the Yellowlegs looks like. And this is based on what we're able to do after we banned a breeding adult. So we can't really follow chicks like we can with the adults because they're too small to put any tracking devices on. But basically, a chick that is born in Alaska, like this little guy here, this nest is halfway hatched. We have two chicks that have made their way out, and then we're just waiting on the other two. So these guys are going to hatch in Alaska in early June, early to mid-June. By September, they're going to be able to fly, leave Alaska, and migrate through the PPR, or the Prairie Pothole region in North and South Dakota. Then they will most often winter in South America for 1 to 2 years. Not always South America. Sometimes they'll be in Central America, but most of them are going to end up in the Argentina, Pampas region, or up in Suriname in the northern area. So once they're 2 years old, they are old enough to breed, and so they will come back to the north, not always to where they were born. They will kind of just follow other flocks until they get to the boreal wetlands in Canada or Alaska. So even if they were born in Anchorage, they could end up breeding for the first time in Eastern Canada. That wouldn't be unusual at all. And once they breed somewhere, then they are loyal to that site and they will go back to it every year. And they live about, the oldest bird that we found has been 9. So we assume they live, maybe 5 to 10 years old. But this is the only study that's really been tracking breeding birds. So that 9-year-old bird that we found is the oldest that we know of. And then once they come back, they start having their own chicks. So this is what the eBird map looks like for Les Yellowlegs, and this is all sightings across all times ever. And you can see that there's obviously a lot of them in the Americas, but there's like little hints here and there in Europe and New Zealand and Asia and Africa. And those are most likely the juveniles that in their first 2 years of life are just kind of scooting around and exploring and, kind of wasting time a little bit because they're not mature enough yet to go breed in the Arctic. So this just kind of shows where they can pop up and why they have all of those different names and why they're called the yellow shank, because they keep popping up in the United Kingdom. I think there's about an average of 7 sightings a year in Britain. So they're considered a rare vagrant anywhere except for the Americas. So this is their traditional actual range, which is breeding in Alaska and Canada and then migrating through the lower 48 and wintering in Central and South America. And then here's another map, and these three lines represent actual GPS data of three specific birds. And so you can kind of see how they've all gone to different places. They were all had GPS trackers put on them in Anchorage, and then one ended up in Suriname, one ended up in Argentina, and one ended up in Mexico. So they kind of do their own thing. Most of them end up in South America, but not all of them. They're yeah, spread around a lot. Not always predictable. So I know Brenda mentioned this the other day on the radio, but I was kind of looking into where you can see these guys in Juneau because I haven't been to Juneau too many times. But it kind of sounded like you guys only really see them during migration season. So like August was kind of the hot spot to see them passing through. And then by September, they weren't really here at all. And you didn't really see them in June either because it was breeding season. But when people do see them, it looked like a lot of eBirders reporting them at Eagle Beach and the Mendenhall Wetland State Game Refuge. And there's this picture on eBird with a flock of migrating yellowlegs, and it looks like this is August in the Mendenhall Wetlands. So if you're looking to see one of these guys, we might have passed the peak season, but in spring, early May or so, late April, early May, they'll probably be coming back through that region. Now, these guys have a couple of lookalikes. So, this is one of the first things I learned when I joined the Les Yellowlegs project because I was new to Shorebird ID. But their main lookalikes, in Anchorage at least, are the greater yellowlegs, solitary sandpiper, and spotted sandpiper. So you can kind of see the difference here. The greater yellowlegs is in the back, lesser is in the front. Greater has a much longer beak that has a slight upturn to it, and they have some darker barring on their sides. So here's another picture that's a little harder to see, but greater's on the left, lesser's on the right. Size difference, and then darker barring and that long beak. So let's see. I've got a little test here that I don't know how well it'll work since I can't see the chat, but one of these guys is the Les Yellowlegs, and the other three are the other three species that I mentioned. If anybody has any thoughts on which one is the lesser.
Upper left.
Yes,
Up,
upper left.
upper left.
Yep, that's right. There we go. So these other two guys, Spotted and Solitary, are the ones that I see sometimes. Spotted and Solitary are both going to have shorter and duller legs and more uniform dark brown backs. And then the yellow legs are going to be more speckled, have bright yellow legs, and then the lesser is going to be smaller than the greater and have that sort of more delicate, small beak. I kind of think of them as, like kind of they look kind of dainty and graceful, like little ballet dancers, and the greater yellow legs just seem noticeably just bigger and kind of clunkier. It's I think it's one of those things that you have to just see a million of them to get sometimes because if they're not standing next to each other, it's not immediately obvious. So, the conservation status of the Les Yellowlegs, why are they a focus of our study and why are they considered of conservation need? So these guys have had major declines since 1970, about 82% in Alaska, 76 in Canada. They were red listed by Alaska Audubon in 2017. They're threatened in Canada, and on the IUCN Red List, they're listed as vulnerable. And the Road to Recovery, which is a international organization that conserves birds, labeled them as a tipping point species. So these guys have been going down quite drastically in the last few decades, and and we didn't really know why, and there wasn't a lot of information available. And so that's part of the reason that the Road to Recovery started this organization in the bottom right. You can see their logo. It's the International Working Group for Les Yellowlegs. And through a lot of these projects, we've been able to identify the conservation challenges to the Les Yellowlegs. So you can see in their breeding grounds, there's a lot of wetland drying with habitat no longer being available. Along their migration route and their wintering area, there are pesticides and farming practices. They are harvested in the Caribbean, legally and illegally, so it's not always sustainable. And then the shoreline hardening, a bit along the Atlantic Flyway, is where there's been development along the coastlines, and habitat is being paved over or turned into an area that makes it inaccessible to the yellowlegs. And these yellow arrows are all the different migratory routes that we have been tracking through GPS over the last few years. So you can see a lot of the Alaska yellowlegs are going down through the Dakotas, and into Argentina. And then there's other Yellowlegs in Fairbanks and along Churchill in Eastern Canada that head down to the Suriname area. So this project, the Les Yellowlegs project, through this international working group, there's 33 members from 8 countries, and they monitor 14 different research and conservation projects, of which the Alaska is one. And the lead of the Alaska Les Yellowlegs project is Dr. Katie Christie, and she's a member of this working group. And what I love about this concept is that it's what's considered full life cycle or holistic conservation. And it's where you kind of understand the concept that the birds don't see borders. They have obviously have no concept of that. And so in order to conserve them properly and to slow these declines, you have to work internationally. You have to have partnerships, and you have to look at the bird across its entire life cycle. You can't just check how it's doing in Alaska and then think it's all fine, because the bird spends most of its life not in Alaska. And if we want to help the populations here, then we have to look along the rest of the places that it is. So the main purpose of this group is to identify the causes of the declines and then implement conservation action that will slow or stop them. And so the 3 actions for this are looking at the survival and reproduction in the boreal breeding grounds in Alaska and Canada. How successful are they doing up here? How many of them are able to successfully hatch nests and survive the summer and get back down to the wintering area? And then where are their key stopover points during their migration? What's important to them, and what can be done to conserve those areas? And then where are they spending their winter, and how can we look at that? So the Alaska portion of this has completed a lot of these goals. So we have finished the study that put GPS tags on the bird to find their migration routes. We are currently looking at the adult survival and nest success by searching for the nests, monitoring how well they do, how many chicks hatch, and how many birds are in the area. And then tagging adult birds so that we can recognize them when they come back each year, and then we can estimate the survival of the bird. And then we also have projects that are not technically in Alaska, but are related to the Alaska populations, such as the agricultural practices in the prairie pothole region in the Dakotas, because that's where most of the Alaska's Les Yellowlegs are going to be migrating through. And we know that because of the study that I just mentioned, the tracking study. You can see the top 3 maps here are the fall migration. Bottom 3 maps are spring migration. And just the top left map there, you can see that this study revealed that all of the Alaskan Les Yellowlegs are going through the prairie pothole region in North and South Dakota. And so that's how we were able to pinpoint where we needed to implement conservation actions, because this is what's important to the birds. And then this study also found birds that were going down through where there was the illegal and unsustainable hunting in the Caribbean, and was able to conclude that Alaska birds don't really go that route. So it's mostly eastern birds that are affected by that. But it was kind of a puzzle piece in how the different populations of Les Yellowlegs, what was affecting them and what was of concern. So you can see the bird here has those green tags on its legs, and I've mentioned banding them for survival. So this is kind of what that looks like. We've banded about 160 Les Yellowlegs since 2018 to check their survival. So you're mostly going to see these guys in Anchorage and the Jay Bear area. So if you guys ever are visiting up here in June, that's where they're most likely going to be. But it's also possible that you can see them when they're migrating through. So I thought it wouldn't hurt to mention it, just in case you guys see any. And if you do, we really want to know those 2 white letters on the flag. This one says LV on it. And if you do see a bird that's banded and you're able to find those letters, you can send it to either one of these email addresses. Mine's on the bottom there. And it helps to know where you saw it, what the code was, and which leg it was on. So this one would be left leg LV, right leg upper green band. That means that it was banded in Anchorage, and then the lower right band is Fish and Wildlife Service ID band. So our field work, what we mostly do in the summer here in Anchorage, this is kind of what we're up to. We are carrying those scopes and backpacks through spruce bog and the coastal wetlands, and we are searching for the banded birds to ID them, and we are searching for nests. And we're always wearing waders and, wading through the mud and the mosquitoes. And then when we capture birds like VP on the left here, And we take their measurements and their weight, and we take some blood samples, and we give them new bands, and then we let them go. And we try to find their chicks as well to just keep track of all of them. And their nests are very hard to find. Let's see if this video works. So imagine that you are in this area with all of this brush and you are trying to find a lusty yellowlegs nest where their eggs are an inch and a half long. And this is where this nest was. Just completely hidden in the brush there. So that is why they are so hard to find, and we find maybe three a summer, and that's considered very good. But we've been doing it for long enough that we've gotten a pretty good amount of nests. And then, like I said, they have that reputation for being car alarms and just squeaking all the time, especially if you're near their chicks or eggs, which we always are because we're looking for the chicks and eggs. And so this is what the adults sound like and why they have earned that name as a car alarm bird. Yeah, so they just kind of do that almost the entire time that we are working in their territory. So it's good fun. It's good fun. So this is the results of all of this work and these projects that we've been doing over the last several years. So first of all, we have quantified a lot of the survival reproduction success in Fairbanks, Anchorage, and Churchill. We have projects going on there, searching for nests and monitoring how well they're doing. We have the migration route tracking, which has been completed, and that's where we banded birds in Fairbanks and Anchorage and tracked their migration routes. So that's been finished. We also have the Birds and Bogs Citizen Science Project in Anchorage that's been going since 2014 and has been surveying some 50 or so wetlands in the Anchorage and Matsu Valley. And that's pretty specific to lusty yellowlegs as well as 11 other boreal species. And so that has a lot of interesting data about their trends in South Central Alaska. We also have a grad student who just finished her thesis on the effects of agricultural practices in this stopover region in North Dakota, which is pretty interesting because she found out that vegetation buffers around foraging sites led to healthier birds and higher food quantity and quality. And so this can kind of lead to potential conservation actions in those area and incentivizing people to leave vegetation buffers around lakes and things like that. So it's all kind of a piece of the puzzle in conserving these birds. We've also implemented shorebird friendly agricultural practices in the Mississippi Delta and the Pampas region of Argentina, which are important stops for these birds. This includes incentivizing people to flood their fields during migration season to provide habitat for the birds. And then we've had hunting closed in Barbados that was not subsistence hunting. And then there's been, refuges created in Barbados. The Caribbean in general was closed for hunting. And then there is subsistence hunting in Suriname, which is important for the community. So we want to keep that going, but to keep it sustainable. So we've implemented game warden and hunter training in that region so that people can still continue to rely on the shorebirds, but it can be done in a sustainable way that will last for many years. So there's a lot of different projects going on, which is all pretty exciting. And I was going to wrap up the presentation a little bit here with going back to that 3 billion birds paper that I mentioned at the beginning, with what is causing bird declines besides habitat degradation, and then some conservation actions that any of us can do to work on that. So this is a graph from the paper that looks at some of the major culprits in the bird decline. Cats are a big one. This paper is from 2015. These numbers have gone up a little bit since then. So now it's estimated that cats are responsible for up to 4 billion bird deaths in the contiguous US, and that window collisions are responsible for up to 1 billion bird deaths in the US. And then there's also vehicle collision, and industrial collision includes power lines, communication towers, and things like that. And then, but these are the actions that we can all take to help prevent this. So you can make windows safer by putting UV dots on your window and turning off your lights at night. I believe that there's brands like Feather Friendly out there that where you can put dots in your window that makes it 100% safe for bird collisions. Keeping cats indoors or building catios can help with keeping cats away from bird habitat, especially in June and July when there's little chicks around. Reducing pesticides can improve the quantity of food. There's been major insect declines, which affects birds, so that can help with that. For raptors specifically, switching to copper ammo can help with them. A lot of raptor declines are caused from lead poisoning, from lead ammunition, and switching to copper is a easy way to take that out of the environment. You can also drink bird-friendly coffee, which supports habitat along migration routes. The Smithsonian has a webpage on this where if you are bird-friendly certified by the Smithsonian, then that is farms that have specifically have this purpose of having shade-grown coffee where they do not deforest an area and they maintain habitat. Plastic use in general, that's kind of applies to seabirds, but a lot of the times, but can't apply to anything. And then citizen science, so eBird and Audubon societies and the big birding day on Saturday, all of that is also really important to conserving birds, and it helps us track things and keep an eye on bird movements and what's important to them. And a lot of these efforts have positive effects. Waterfowl have increased by about 56% in the last few decades because of preserving habitat, and raptors have also increased because there's been a lot of efforts towards getting lead and pesticides out of their environment. And specifically with shorebirds, sort of leaving them alone as they're migrating, giving them space, keeping dogs leashed on the beach. Dogs that chase flocks of shorebirds can be pretty dangerous because the birds are exhausted and low on energy because they're at the end of their migration, and being chased by animals on the beach sort of forces them to use energy that they don't have. So it's a small thing that anyone can do to kind of keep them from being disturbed. And then helping them migrate by reducing the lighting. And oh, can you guys still see me?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't have my presentation anymore, but I think I was mostly done. I think my dog pulled a cord out. Well, anyway, okay, here we go. And then watch birds showing what you see, watching chicks in the road, and keeping cats out of there. So yeah, I guess if you want to learn more about the TED program, we have an Instagram and a Facebook, and we have a conservation stamp that supports fish and wildlife research and education. And yeah, I guess 47 minutes, not too bad. We should have time for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Yeah, anybody that has questions, just raise your hand and she can call on you and get those questions answered. Deb posted in the chat that she saw an lesser yellow legs calling from a spruce tree in June here in Juneau.
Ooh, interesting. I wonder, was it early June, do you know?
I'm sorry, I had you on mute. Say that again.
Do you know when in June it was? Because a lot
I'd have to
sometimes
look back
there.
and I'd have to look back in my notes, but it's a place I hike in June, sometimes in July, and I've been there a couple times over the years where I've had an adult yellowlegs doing an alarm call on top of a small tree. And I think there's spruce, they could be hemlock. I can't remember what kind of tree it was. But
Oh,
it's the second,
cool.
I've seen a bird there twice. And I'm assuming
Yeah.
because of that time of year that it's nesting.
Yeah, yeah. I know most of them kind of nest up in the north, but it's always possible that one or two are finding somewhere in Juneau, if they like the habitat. So maybe you found one of the few that are nesting there in June. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'll never find the nest though.
I mean, I can barely find the nest, and that's what I'm out there for. So
Yeah, it's perfect habitat. It's that kind of muskegee grass, uh, various different shrub species that are really low growing. So it really looks like it would be appropriate habitat.
oh, nice.
You can add that to your information pile.
Yeah, I don't really hear that much about the southeast birds, so that's always cool to hear new reports like that.
Okay, good.
I am trying to find the Instagram for the TED, excuse me, TED account. Um,
Oh yeah, let me see what our actual handle is. It's ADFG underscore TED program.
oh, okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, I can put that here. ADFG underscore TED program. There we go. Yeah, that's us on Instagram.
Awesome.
So,
Oh, I'll put it in the, let's see. Looks like Kim had a note about um the raptors in lead. Margaret had a also has a greater Yellowlegs on Henriksen Point here in town, yelling like a menace.
yeah, the greater Yellowlegs also do that. Yeah. I've heard I forget their name, but I remember this one naturalist in like the early 1900s described the Yellowlegs as a bird that was yelling as though the like universe would come to an end if they stopped yelling. Like everything depended on them continuing to make noise. That's how they've been described before.
I do have a question. I know a lot of people have left their positions at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but I'm wondering if you have partners in the migratory bird program that are working along with you on this.
Yeah, we work with Fish and Wildlife Service a lot. We have they're the ones that are working up in Fairbanks on the Yellowlegs up there. So they've banded a lot of bird Yellowlegs for us in Fairbanks and go out and look for their survival every year as well. And they also assist with some outreach and things like that. So yeah, we work with the feds a lot. They're a great help.
Good, thank you.
Well, that was really great, Erin. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and um, I think we all get up to Anchorage every now and again, so we'll have a new understanding of an appreciation of your lesser yellow legs up there. Oh, Kim had another question here. How are the fish and game agencies in North Dakota and South Dakota helping?
So I don't think we're actually partnered with the fish and game agencies there. We are working with the University of Idaho. So our grad student, she was working with the Les Yellowlegs project for several years, and then she went to the University of Idaho to do her graduate work. And the project takes place in North and South Dakota, but it's funded through the University of Idaho, and then it's managed by the leader of the Alaska Les Yellowlegs project, and we provide a lot of the assistance and the project design. And I went down there to help her a couple years ago, and that was pretty cool because I got to see the Lesseola eggs in the Prairie Pothole region, and they were Alaskan Lesseola eggs, but they were, on their migration route up there, so it was kind of cool to see.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron, great work. Really cool to see all you guys are doing. I was curious. I did not know that that I didn't realize that any of these birds that migrated would spend maybe more than one, like a winter on their migration, on their wintering grounds. So these ones you said 1 or 2 years. So they'll just stay down there until they, I guess, mature and then move north again to breed.
Yeah, so the Lesseola eggs will not return for their breeding season until they're at least 2 years old. So if we have a bird that we banded when they were breeding, then we sort of estimate their age, starting with at least two. So if we banded a bird 7 years ago, then we'll assume it's at least 9 years old because a 1-year-old bird would not come back to the breeding grounds. So that's kind of what I think that eBird chart was, where there's birds popping up in Europe and Africa and such. I kind of we think that those are juveniles that are a year old and they're just kind of exploring and messing around and you know they have no concerns yet because they're not old enough to breed. But yeah.
The good old days of when we were all 20. You know other shorebirds that do that?
What was that?
You know of other shorebirds that spend multiple years on their wintering, on the sort of quote wintering grounds?
Oh, not specifically because I haven't studied many other species, but a lot of shorebirds they kind of employ similar life strategies, so I wouldn't be surprised if other shorebird species did that.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Margaret had a question about Roy Churchwell.
Oh yeah, Roy. Yeah, he worked for the department, but looks like yeah, I know he just left recently, but I'm not quite sure where he went. Looks like Kim thinks he's in Minnesota. But oh yeah, well, miss having him around. Oh, how fast can they walk? So they're pretty fast. They and they're you can see that video where I had the nest, that brush was really dense. It was just willow and grass and lakes and things like that. And the yellow legs, you can kind of see in the some of the pictures they have these like big long toes or in that chick and they can just dart across the ground if they want to. They can move pretty fast. I'm not sure what the miles per hour there would be, but they can really zip across the ground if they want to.
Can they multitask and yell and run at the same time, or are they normally stationary when they're yelling?
They're normally stationary. They don't very often go onto the ground unless they're actively foraging. So if we are in an area where they're nesting, they will be tree topping. They will perch on the top of spruce trees and sticks, anything that gives them a good view, and they will just stand there and scream at you and be like, "Get out of here! Get out of my territory!" And then if they're foraging, so they're in a kind of a completely different mindset, then they will be quiet and they will just kind of walk along a little coastline in the mud and just kind of quietly and calmly look for bugs. So they sort of have their two moods depending on if they're foraging or if they're protecting their chicks. But if they're screaming at you, they're almost always tree topping when they do it.
Cool. Well, yeah. Oh, Margaret, you
How
came off.
long
Oh,
how long can their legs get?
Oh, I don't know the exact inches, but trying to kind of visualize it here. Wonder where are my measurements? Let me go back to my measurement slide. That's a really good question that I don't know off the top of my head. Okay, so they stand about 10 inches tall, and their little bodies don't take up that much room. So probably like, you know, yeah, 7 6 7 inches maybe. Yeah, good question.
well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and let's give Erin a nice Zoom round of applause for speaking to us from Anchorage. We really enjoyed having you online here, and um, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your enthusiasm about lesser yellowlegs. This was super fun.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
yeah. Thanks for joining.